Hello again, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this Friday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. Has this weather graphic up first here, and next storminess coming up from the south. So back to the winter weather advisories out here for the Yukon Delta, lower Yukon Valley, and then northward there into the greater Galena area, Seward Peninsula, winter weather advisory out. And then there's a winter storm warning out tonight through, actually through Sunday, or into Sunday, here for the, or through Saturday night at least, into Sunday for St. Lawrence Island, the Bering Strait coast. 2 to 7 inches of snow possible across over the next couple of days, 36, 48 hours. And winds gusting as high as 65 miles an hour. Starting out, those winds will be more kind of a east-northeast direction to start with tonight into tomorrow, and then eventually, and especially on Sunday when a pretty good system tracks by just to your south, you actually see gusts. That's when the strongest winds will occur on Sunday, early Sunday, and the winds will become more east-southeast, and along with that will be warmer temperatures. And then we've got a blizzard warning out for the Baldwin Peninsula and Selawik Valley. And that's out, let's see, from 9 a.m. Saturday until 9 p.m. Sunday. And that's for anywhere from 2 to 4 inches of snow and winds gusting to 50 miles an hour. And the two combined are expected to create whiteout conditions, hence a blizzard warning. Visibility is less than a quarter of a mile. Winter weather advisory up here along the western Arctic coast, also down along the northwest coast there. And then a wind advisory out for the Alaska Range later tonight, and that'll stay out through until noon Sunday. So through Sunday morning there, south winds, pretty persistent once it gets going here tonight, will be sustained around 30 miles an hour with gusts to 60, give or take there, 60 miles an hour through the passes, mainly west of the Toe Cutoff. And again, that's out through noon Sunday. And possibility some loose objects could be blown around. And moving on to the satellite imagery, clear skies, clear and cold conditions still over the interior here, but you can see warmer conditions. That's increasing moisture, the optical depth of the moisture layer, along with some clouds moving northeastward here, coming across south central Alaska, and pushing some light precipitation with it into the North Gulf Coast in areas, Prince William Sound, and a little bit over into the eastern side of the Turnagain Arm area. Also a patch of precipitation in this cloud feature making its way onshore, mostly over the central panhandle. Sitka picked up about 7/100 of an inch, so pretty light shower activity here with that, not much anywhere else. Had some about a ½ inch of snow fell in Yakutat with some snow showers earlier today, and maybe a ½ inch to an inch of snow fell at Cordova, and water equivalents, though, really not all that impressive, and some light snow at Valdez. Gulkana picked up maybe ½ an inch of snow, ½ inch to ½ inch, with this moisture coming in, riding over the colder air. And even back here along where the main frontal boundary is, precipitation is not all that impressive. Places like Platinum and Cape Newenham had about ½ an inch water equivalent. That changing over to rain, started out as snow, of course, and then changing over to rain with winds gusting anywhere from 40 to 50 miles an hour now out of the southeast, east-southeast here from Koryak or St. Lawrence Island, Yukon Delta coast, down to Cape Newenham. Pretty windy Bristol Bay as well. Igigik, there west-southwest of King Salmon, had gusts 45 miles an hour this afternoon. Winds on the increase in King Salmon, and maybe a 1/10 of an inch of precipitation fell Kodiak, and about another 1/10 fell at Unalaska. So really not any impressive precipitation amounts showing up at these reporting stations, but back down, colder air coming eastward here, coming eastward along the western and central Aleutians, this area here behind this trough axis there. And so snowfall levels back down to sea level, reporting snow at Adak and some snow shower activity at Shimia, mixed rain and snow there at Atka, while in Alaska and Umak Island areas, probably up to the Pribilof, reporting periods of light rain or rain showers there. And for the southeast coast, looks like or today, as I mentioned, light amounts of precipitation coming in. You can see the tightening gradient in advance of this front pushing eastward in toward Bristol Bay today, and that winds diminishing behind the front, western Alaska Peninsula, rain and showers behind that eastern Aleutians, tightening gradient, but no precipitation yet, gusts 45 miles an hour at 3 p.m. at Gamble, and 40 to 45 even over toward Unalakleet, and winds will start coming up a little bit more, seeing an increase now, but not as strong as areas south of the Seward Peninsula. And then up along the Arctic coast, not a bad day today. Light winds, few patchy areas of some flurries or light fog, nothing too significant there. And still cold over the upper Yukon Valley, eastern interior of the Arctic high, sitting over there in the Yukon. For tonight, that high continues to pull off to the southeast or east-southeast, and that's going to continue to allow an inflow of moisture in some westerly winds aloft to infiltrate the northern panhandle. And that'll be a mixture of rain or snow. It'll be light, whatever it falls. And depending on whether it's rain or snow, of course, will depend on your latitude, elevation, and time of the evening. Should stay mostly dry to even mostly clear as you head south there toward Dixon Entrance, Prince of Wales Island. And then snow and blowing snow, winter weather advisories, and the winter storm warning St. Lawrence Island here as tightening gradient, snow, and improving, though, late tonight behind the front for the Yukon Delta coast and Nunavut Island, and then that trough swings some showers and gusty winds into the Alaska Peninsula. Rain and breezy, not too bad on the winds for Kodiak Island, and looks like should be mostly rain by tomorrow morning along the North Gulf Coast at sea level, a mixture as you head inland, and then it sort of cuts off in the coast range there. Not looking for a whole lot in the Copper River Basin. Stays dry tonight over the eastern and northern part of the state. This area, light snow will stay off the western Arctic coast, and snow showers continue to come around in the cold air coming out of the Russian Far East here, heading eastward. Adak and Atka snow showers, maybe outright light snow for the western Aleutians. Northwest winds gusting to 40, 45 miles an hour out there. A little bit of a break for the eastern Aleutians and Pribilofs. Then for tomorrow, pretty good low here, tracks right up the coastline, and that's good for strong winds here for the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta areas. Could see gusts 60, 70 miles an hour. And of course, looking at 65 mile an hour wind gusts there for St. Lawrence Island, front up across Seward Peninsula. Blizzard warning, Selawik Valley, Baldwin Peninsula. Snow blowing snow on the increase up the northwest coast, and even a little bit of an increase in the winds here for the Arctic coast. Be strongest here in the west, lightest in the east. This front, windy, warmer, wetter here for south central Alaska. Pretty good shot of moisture coming up with this front, slowly moving. And again, mixed precipitation, kind of hard to tell where the line will be, but could be some local areas of freezing rain. But right now it looks like the transition will be pretty quick. And the northern panhandle keeps a chance of rain, snow, or mixed rain and snow in the forecast there. And that extends a little farther south than it will tonight. And for the outlook on Sunday, a trough, yet another trough keeps it unsettled there for the southeast coast, and some scattered snow showers here, Copper River Basin, along the Alaska Range to Denali Park or so, and another batch of light snow up here over the north central interior, Brooks Range, Anatuvik, Adigan, Chandelar Lake, maybe Bigfoot, down into the Koyukuk Valley, part of the Kobuk Valley, and then along the southern slopes of the eastern Brooks Range. Fair for the Arctic coast, a little breezy on the east side, and much better conditions coming into the western part of the state here, right down into the south central Alaska Kenai Peninsula. A little breezy, but dry, just some rain and snow showers along the Kuskokwim Delta coast, and some showers and rain with that fairly weak by comparison system here over the Aleutians. And then the next one way out there on the edge of the chart, not really all that strong, but we have this trough here over the central Bering Sea that may keep us a few showers in over the Pribilofs, but the bulk of the moisture remaining back here as that low continues to weaken and becomes stationary. Lows for tonight, upper Yukon Valley, don't look for much of a drop from what you have this afternoon. Could see 35 to 40 below, and still below zero central eastern Arctic coast down into the north of the Alaska Range, 20, 25 below north in Tokwe. 20s, but temperatures coming up here in mild southerly flow across southern Alaska, panhandle upper 20s to lower 30s. And for the highs tomorrow, looking staying below zero, but up quite a bit from today there for the northeast interior. and 30s to lower 40s here for the Bristol Bay area, and mid 40s for the Alaska Peninsula. And then lows here for Sunday morning. Still low below zero on the Arctic coast, upper Yukon Valley, Northway and Tok, otherwise above freezing along southern Alaska.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
First line weather graphic here for Saturday morning. A lot of marginal and IFR conditions here, actually from the northern Bering Sea on in across southern Alaska here, but not so much for the Susitna Valley Copper River Basin. Central or the interior looking pretty good. Some marginal VFR central Arctic coast north slope, and the Panhandle, some marginal VFR up here Lincoln Isle Glacier Bay area, VFR to the south. And then for the afternoon, IFR more widespread now for the North Gulf Coast here, all the way over to Yakutat with a marginal VFR into Elephant Cove, and then on down along and over Sitka to Port Alexander. VFR inside waters, but staying marginal for Lincoln Isle Glacier Bay. And still on the lee side of the coast range here, we've got some VFR in the Copper River Basin, lee side of the Alaska range, all the way around VFR, Bristol Bay, Alaska Peninsula, and a good portion of the Bering Sea, Pribilofs, VFR tomorrow from Adak westward to Shemya, marginal. Brooks Range, VFR, and some marginal VFR for the North Slope and Arctic coast, mostly in the central areas. And then for Sunday morning, that appears to lift mostly off the coast. Point Barrow there, the greater area, still prone to some marginal VFR, but really not too bad into the Brooks Range. VFR got over toward the Long Mountains on the southern slopes. We've got some IFR, and also some IFR south side of the Seward Peninsula, Tin City, Wales, on down to, it looks like, Gamble with Savunga in the marginal zone. And VFR, southwest coast, Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, Norton Sound, some marginal VFR just catching the Pribilofs, and areas of marginal VFR for the Aleutians. And Kodiak looking pretty good with VFR for the afternoon Sunday. Zone of IFR now from the, looks like the part of the Kobuk-Koyukuk Valley areas up into the central Brooks Range, and along and on the south side of the mountains there off to the east, but to the west, VFR, northwest coast, western Arctic coast, right on down across Kuskokwim Valley into Kodiak Island, Chillicothe Strait, Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula VFR for the afternoon, and just some marginal VFR here over along the Alaska range, otherwise north and south, mostly VFR, patch of marginal conditions, Prince William Sound, and then marginal and IFR for the southeast coast. Passes, Hanatuvik, VFR, same forecast for Adigan. Looking pretty good tomorrow, or will be. Sealands visibility is unlimited, hopefully. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, IFR, especially on the eastern entrance here, that's where the lowest flying conditions will be. So could be a little bit, or will be better out the west entrance there into the valley. And for rainy again, IFR, eastern entrance, better conditions out west, and windy, IFR. Isabel, marginal, and then Tasta, looking marginal, not as marginal as Isabel, but still could drop into that marginal category. And for Tanita, marginal VFR, possible IFR eastern entrance. And for Portage, or I'm sorry, I got them backwards. Let me say that again. Tanita, occasionally marginal, could be VFR right on the border there. Now for Portage, I'll go IFR, could be low IFR in the eastern entrance and maybe a little bit better than IFR on the west end. And for Chilkoot and White, marginal VFR trending toward a little bit worse conditions in the afternoon, may or may not reach IFR, but just kind of trending it that way. And for the freezing levels here, 2,000 feet up over the southwest interior, 4,000 right into southern Cook Inlet, Kachemak Bay, Kodiak Island, and then on down the southeast coast. Surface here, southern Alaska, North Gulf Coast to Nunivak Island, but north of the Pribilofs. And for icing, all the moisture coming up, series of warm fronts. Here's the first surge pulling back to the northwest and west-northwest here with some areas of considerable moderate with that there embedded in the more widespread lighter icing zone. And then another surge here coming up into the North Gulf Coast. Look for considerable moderate here along the Coast Range, Kenai Peninsula. And for the jet stream, south to north flow, high pressure sharpening up here, but sort of pulling off to the east. And so this southerly flow will be coming on in and bringing the warmer conditions and wind with it and precipitation. 40 to 55 knot winds, high as maybe 50 to 55 over the southwest interior. Lighter for the Aleutians, southwest 25, and about 25 to 30 knots into the Panhandle. Lighter at 3,000 feet, 10 to 15. Jumping ahead to turbulence, moderate chop, pretty widespread here over the west coast from the northwest coast through the western interior, Kodiak Island, and the Alaska Peninsula.
Space weather affects technologies. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches to our customers so they can take action.
The Space Weather Prediction Center has had a long-standing relationship with the power industry, so they've been aware that solar storms, the geomagnetic storm piece of that, can affect the operation of their systems and induce extra currents and loads on those systems that can either trip those systems offline or in the worst of cases, cause damage. That relationship goes back for several decades. In fact, a big incident in 1989 where part of Quebec was tripped offline that affected something like 6 million customers for about 9 hours. I think that really raised the awareness in the power industries.
When we get the alert, we watch the grid and start looking for issues. Are we seeing a decline in voltage? Are we seeing equipment failures? And we readjust the system to try to mitigate those problems, try to keep the lights on and keep it from going out.
Averaging about 500, 550 kilometers per second.
If we didn't have this early warning, we wouldn't see it until our sensor saw it. Getting more information quicker and faster before the storm hits, not during the storm, is a big improvement.
In the long term, I think what we need and what we're moving toward, the U.S. as a whole, is better modeling, fully understanding this phenomenon, understanding how it would impact specific systems.
Rather than actually experiencing a storm, we can simulate storms in our software and see what the impact is. We try to get ahead of it. We always plan that if there's an outage, how can we keep the lights on? What's the best process to prevent it?
In the end, 5-10 years from now, there's going to be a whole mix of operational procedures driven by what we do on prediction and warning. And then there also will probably be some level of hardware controls to ensure the reliability of the grid.
Space weather affects technologies. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches to our customers so they can take action.
There's different types of impacts on communication systems, and the HF we call the high frequency, which is that band of communications 3 to 30 megahertz. But it's a very important band of radio communication because it's used widespread. It's used, for example, by the airlines.
HF radio is most commonly used for position reporting when you're going across the ocean airspace, which is devoid of radar. And ATC can't see you, so it's up to you to report your position and your altitude and your speed.
HF works great most of the time, except during a big flare. And during a big flare, that HF communication capability could be gone within a minute or two. So as soon as we see something happening in there, or we see a flare, it's one of the first things we do is alert the aviation community, hey, big flare, HF's going to be impacted.
Once we know that there's an event going on, then the aviation industry and the airlines can react to that. They can alter their routes over the poles. They can lower the altitudes that they're flying at, or maybe decide not to fly at all in the interest of the passenger safety.
So that's just one example of how HF is used, but the emergency response community will use it a lot too. It's one of their primary backups.
When you've lost connectivity between certain government agencies, it gives you that long-range coverage to talk from out of state to federal governments or from the FEMA locations to the state emergency operations centers.
So if you've got a big hurricane impact in the coastline, whatever big city, we've got the cell towers down and whatnot, we've got emergency communication folks in there. Those folks are very familiar with space weather and how it impacts their systems.
Here in recent years, it was used during Katrina when we had a lot of communications outages down there. It was also used during Hurricane Ike. There was an outage of the telephone circuits with the Texas State Emergency Office, so it was used in both of those situations.
So when we talk about backup, especially for the airlines, typically they'll have SATCOM, so it'll be satellite communication.
The satellite technology that emergency responders use could be GPSs, could be satellite phones, satellite data terminals.
Space weather events can impact SATCOMs. The impact can range from a nuisance to loss of a spacecraft. So we will give them the heads up. If we have space weather events, flares, whatnot, they need to know what's impacting their systems. Situational awareness is key. Time is of essence to these folks. Again, it's life and death.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Sea ice analysis. Chuck TC here, continuing to gradually ice in. Have some now out in the central area there of the open water. And it looks like ice will start to melt here along the southwest coast with storminess coming in, but from, say, St. Lawrence Island northward, that probably won't kick in for areas south of the Bering Strait until probably Sunday, late Sunday. And it looks like these northern areas probably will continue to see a nice expansion over the next 5 days. And for the coastal water forecast here for the south coast of the Panhandle, southerlies 15 to 20 knots tomorrow, seas running 8 feet. Small craft advisories on the north coast due to 25-knot winds from the south and southeast. And those seas also at 8 feet. Light variable winds over the inside waters of the Panhandle there, with seas pretty slight as well, down to 2 feet. Moving on to Sunday, southeast 10 knots, staying light there for Clarence Strait, Stevens Passage, seas at 2 feet. Lynn Canal, more of a breeze, southerlies at 15 with seas at 3 feet. South winds 15 to 20. On the south coast, continues seas higher though, 11 to 12 feet, and 13-foot seas with south to southeast winds 20 to 25 knots for the north coast. Prince William Sound tomorrow, east 30 knots, sustained, seas 6 feet, southeast 30 with 10-foot seas for the eastern North Gulf Coast, 10-foot seas and southeasterlies 25 knots for the western North Gulf Coast, southerlies at 30 knots for the Barren Islands, turn southeast at 30 knots for Kamishak Bay. Cook Inlet, small craft advisories, northeast winds 25 to 30 knots, strongest south of the Forelands with seas 7 to 9 feet. And for the outlook on Sunday, small craft advisories here for northern Cook Inlet, good winds coming out of Turnagain Arm, and so southeast 25 here with seas at 4 feet, and east winds at 20 knots for southern Cook Inlet, 30-knot easterlies Kamishak Bay, gale warnings for the Barren Islands, southeast 35 knots, seas up to looks like 18 feet, and southeast 30 to 13-foot seas there for the western North Gulf Coast, as well as the east side here around Middleton Island. And small craft advisories continue for Prince William Sound, looking at winds east on Sunday, 25 knots, 7-foot seas. Kodiak Island, southerly winds 25 to 30 knots tomorrow, seas up to 15 feet. And southwest winds 30 to 40 knots here for the Alaska Peninsula. Bristol Bay south, 45 knots and 12-foot seas. Moving ahead to Sunday, change of direction here. Southeast 25 to 30 knots for the Alaska Peninsula, seas 8 to 12 feet. And 40-knot winds all around Kodiak Island. Southeast on the east side, easterlies 40 knots, Sitkinak or Akiak to Castle Cape, and Shelikof Strait, east winds at 40 knots with 9-foot seas. Easterlies at 30 for Bristol Bay. And for the Fox Islands tomorrow, 20 to 25 knot winds from the southwest. Highest looks like on the southern side of Unalaska Island, seas running 9 to 15 feet. 15 to 30 knot winds here for the central Aleutians. Again, Pacific side seeing the strongest winds, highest seas, and then southwest 20 turned north at 25 there west of Kiska Island. And outlook for Sunday, northwest 30 knots here for the western Aleutians, 20 to 25 knot northwesterlies, Adak and Atka, south-southeast 15 to 25 for the Fox Islands. Southwest coast, south 40 knots tomorrow, northeast 45 knots St. Lawrence Island, gales in Norton Sound, and northwest 40 knots for St. Matthew Island, westerlies at 30 for the Pribilofs. And the outlook for Sunday, southeast 35 there, gale warning St. Lawrence Island, east-southeast 30 knots for the southwest coast and the northern Bering Sea, southeast 20 for the Pribilofs. Central eastern Beaufort Sea coast, 20 knot winds tomorrow from the east here on the far eastern end, northeast for the east side and central coast, east at 30 for the west side, and then good gales, Cape Beaufort to Cape Thompson, northeast 40 knots with gales all the way down to the Bering Strait and beyond. Sunday, southeast 25 to 30 knot winds here up to Cape Thompson or Cape Beaufort, and then the western Arctic coast, 30 knots out of the east, and 25 to 35 knot winds for the remainder of the coastline, strongest over to demarcation point. Dry and light winds up there tonight. Into the Tanana Valley, though, winds on the increase through the Alaska Range with the wind advisory to the last into Sunday. And winter storm warning here, St. Lawrence Island. Blizzard warning actually kicks in for tomorrow for the Selawik Valley, Baldwin Peninsula. Otherwise, winter weather advisories here for much of the southwest interior. And wind, warmer temperatures, rain spreading northeastward to about something like this tomorrow. And on Sunday, much better here in the west into Cook Inlet, south central Alaska. Next system rolls into Kodiak.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.